Welcome back, students. We are in the final piece of Module 1, social welfare, past and present. We're moving now into much more current times. And the first thing that we're going to spend some time talking about was an effort under the Clinton administration to move forward on what has probably been identified as one of the most significant efforts at welfare reform. So from this slide, you can see that we are talking about a point in time during the 60s when we were taking a look at what might be identified as the anti-establishment movement. We were in the middle of the Vietnam War. We were seeing riots in most of the large urban settings. Martin Luther King was championing the cause of disenfranchised Americans. And the issue of inflation was something that was happening. So it was becoming more and more difficult to be able to purchase the things that we had previously been able to purchase with the amount of money that we were making. So out of that, all of those entities coming together was where you saw the emergence of what's been identified as conservatism, and really sort of this feeling of less government, pulling back, again, going back to that sort of laissez-faire kind of approach in terms of dealing with social service and poverty programs. Then moving on to the 1980s, we saw efforts to really reduce or eliminate welfare and government social entitlement programs. Welfare was seen as costly. Again, the issue of inflation was something that the country was experiencing at that particular time, and it was a feeling that maybe welfare and social service programs had become too expensive and just needed to be eliminated because of the fact that we were experiencing all this inflation. Many support programs were either reduced or dramatically eliminated. Again, conservatives were feeling that government was just getting way too big. They felt that there needed to be a shift, and the shift was that welfare programs were transitioned out of the federal government and became more and more the responsibility of the state government. The other thing that emerged out of this particular time was what were called workfare programs. And workfare programs, as you probably have heard, are programs where there's a requirement for the recipient for the benefit to be able to be moving towards or be securing employment, and that the benefits would be only for a limited amount of time. So as the slides here says, way of providing money to otherwise unemployed or underemployed people who are applying for social benefits, but with workfare, but workfare was the program that was really asking that they had to be working or moving towards employment at that particular time that they received the benefits. In 1988, we saw the Democratic Congress pass what was called the Family Support Act. This was considered significant welfare reform. Most significant piece of welfare legislation since the Social Security Act of 1935. It mandated that states provide job opportunities and basic skills programs to aid to families with dependent children recipients. And then we saw that followed by the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996. This was under President Clinton, who was quoted as saying that we were going to end welfare as we know it. This again was landmark legislation. The goal of the reform was to make welfare a second chance, not a way of life, as Clinton was quoted as saying. He wanted welfare to, and these types of programs to really reflect things like employment readiness, parental responsibility, and state discretion. And again, it was an effort to try to move recipients off of what were called welfare roles and towards self-sufficiency. It required that each state administer assistance programs. They changed the AFDC program to what's now called TANF, or the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. States received block grants to design and operate programs. What's a block grant? A block grant is a program where the federal government provides the funding with very little or very limited direction. So what happens is that every state it's left up to every state to determine what their program is going to look like given the funds that they've been provided by the federal government. So what that meant was that there was often significant differences between one state or another in terms of how AFDC families were being managed. The Tanf Grant had a maximum benefit of 2 consecutive years and a 5-year lifetime limit, and required that all recipients of welfare aid must find work within 2 years of receiving aid. And TANF had even more restricted benefits for unmarried mothers under the age of 18. There was actually an effort to try to use TANF as a way of being able to address the emerging teen pregnancy sort of epidemic that was happening in the United States at that particular time. Moving on into George W. Bush, during his tenure, welfare rolls reduced, but there was absolutely more working poor, rapidly growing underclass, fewer jobs, most without benefits. Communities felt the brunt, and a significant piece of the Bush administration was dealing with Hurricane Katrina and other natural disasters. Bush argued that government cannot solve every problem, but it can encourage people and communities to help themselves and help one another. He asserted that the truest kind of compassion is to help citizens build lives of their own, and he termed this compassionate conservatism. The Obama years, when President Obama was elected, I think in terms of those that care about social services and social work, really felt like maybe there was going to be some changes that were going to come about, because it seemed that President Obama had really talked quite a bit about the need for social welfare programs when he was running for office. He expressed a strong commitment to social and economic justice. And he had actually worked as a community organizer in Chicago. So it felt like he was, kind of part of the community in terms of advancing social and economic justice. But the Obama administration really began to focus quite significantly on healthcare. Rightly so, in terms of the fact that if you could address healthcare, you'd probably be able to address a number of other issues that people who were living in poverty might be experiencing. The country experienced a significant budget deficit. There was a stimulus package that was put into place. So what you can begin to see is that the money that maybe could have originally or inevitably gone into social service programs, all of a sudden were needing to be used simply to keep the country operating. There were a number of economic and international issues that Obama ended up needing to deal with. And the bottom line was that we really did not see a lot of progress on social and economic justice issues during the Obama administration. And then finally, moving into the Trump administration, the Trump administration has taken a variety of different approaches to try to sort of change the way that we think about poverty. So they've proposed altering the way the government determines the national poverty threshold, really putting Americans who are living in the margins at risk of losing access to welfare programs. They're talking about changing how inflation is calculated, so that people who maybe would have fallen on the side of being under the poverty level would no longer be there, simply because they sort of moved the line. The formula has been used for decades to determine whether people qualify for certain federal benefits and programs. Again, this measure, which was first set in the 1960s, is calculated at 3 times the cost of minimum food diet and adjusted every year as prices rise. In 2018, a family of 4 making no more than $25,900 was considered impoverished or living in poverty. By changing the index the government used to calculate how much the cost of living rises or falls, the poverty level could rise at a slower rate. So it's really changing the way that we measure poverty and not really addressing the issue of poverty. This possible change appears to be the latest effort by the Trump administration to make it harder to access welfare programs. Trump has been known to sign executive orders, and last year he did sign one calling on federal agencies to be more strict in terms of enforcing current work requirements. He's quoted as saying, "Millions of able-bodied working age adults continue to collect food stamps without working or even looking for work. Our goal is to move these Americans from dependency to independence and into a good paying job and rewarding careers." So that concludes Modular 1. If you have any questions, we can talk about it during the office hours that will be coming up soon. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.